I'm really excited to talk to Fiona Hiscocks today. Fiona, tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, first, Stephanie, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm going to call it a show because I think it's fantastic. I am a culture and change professional. So I've been working of culture and change for over 20 years. And I get great joy out of helping create amazing businesses where people love to come to work, where they feel valued, they feel seen, and they can be their best selves. So I work at the intersection of well-being, sustainability, and culture, because I believe all those things are interconnected.
Fiona, and that is amazing, and we love what you do. Tell us a little bit more about your journey, how you got to this point where you're at such an important intersection where we need to bring about a lot of change.
So I began my career in IBM, and talk about a very male-dominated, logical, rational place to begin. And I struggled to find my place. I was working, first of all, in disaster recovery and then e-business and finance consulting, when I came across a man who was talking about storytelling. And I went along to his lunch and learn and thought, oh my word, this resonates so much with me. And so I went up to him afterwards and I said, I love what you're doing. Can I please join your team? And he said, tell me about you. I said, well, my family are from Wales. He went, job done. You're in the team. Because it turned out he was also Welsh. And so we were a team of 4 Welsh people in the big conglomerate of IBM, hiding, innovating with how to use storytelling in business. And in the beginning, that was around how do we share and collect and share knowledge, because stories are the way that we have been, that's how we came about. We sat around the fire and we shared our stories. And so we did a really great first piece of work, and we're completely innovating and learning by the seat of our pants about how to do this work. And as I then was privileged enough to go and collect stories, and I talked to builders, the construction workers, I talked to the project managers, the community, the retailers, I just saw how powerful it was to give people a space to share their story. And I was so touched by what people shared and how they came alive when they shared their story. So that became my big passion around how do we use stories in business, but also as a human connection tool. I then subsequently went off to work in a small consultancy with interdisciplinary teams. So we had theatre designers and we had artists and actors all working together to create innovative solutions for businesses. And that was such an honor. And we went to Saudi Arabia and we did a job over there. And I loved what that culture was like. I worked in Switzerland and worked in France and did all these great jobs. And then I realized I wanted to go back to university. I've always had a real social calling, so I took myself off to Harvard's Kennedy School of Government to do a master's in public administration with my husband and 1-year-old baby, and had the most magical year at Harvard with all these mid-careers from all over the world, thinking about how do we transform government. And had my second baby over there, and was managed to be lucky enough to get a job in Washington, D.C., working for a nonprofit that was looking at how do we strengthen leadership, and that being a way to transform the American government. And my portfolio was a senior executive service. So I was so blessed to be able to be there when Obama was elected in that time of great hope, and going to the executive office of the president and supporting the president's management council, pinching myself and thinking, I am in the West Wing. So yes, and then from there came back to the UK, set up went back to consulting, and then I had my moment of mental break, and that was the time that changed everything, when I realized I had been unbalanced and living in my masculine. And that led me into a healing moment where I was able to take that advantage of that and really look at what am I here to do on this earth and how can I be of service, and realizing the importance of well-being, the importance of purpose and meaning. And so that then led to a new offering with a company called Motive, and then finally to setting up Organisational Alchemy, whose purpose is to bring connection and heart into business, and through that transform the businesses and the people who work there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for telling your story, Fiona. And you say on your LinkedIn that you are a steward of human spirit. Will you tell us a bit more about that?
So I think for many years in my beginning of my career, people were human resources, which I think is the most clunky, awful term. And as I did the work with culture and change and realized that it was the people who were the ones who make the difference, and to realize also that their soul had been neglected in this work, and it had become a very cognitive, rational exercise. Let's do a skills inventory and a competency assessment. And actually, that's only like a third of the picture, where that really, if we can connect with people in a really meaningful way and connect with their hearts and connect with their souls, then we have such huge potential. And so I really started, along with that line of being of service, to see myself as steward for the human spirit. How do I help bring that thinking in and give people the space to flourish, to feel seen, to feel included, and that their voice matters? And that's really what drives me every day.
Fiona, and with Organisational Alchemy, I know a big picture what you're doing. Can you tell us a bit more in detail what that would look like?
So because we work at the intersection of well-being, sustainability and purpose and culture, that allows us to take a really systemic view. And I think having grown up in the time of business process re-engineering, which was all about efficiencies and stripping out what my husband beautifully calls the kind of the fat out of the system. So you want the steak with the marbling, because that's what makes it juicy and tasty. And we stripped all of that out. And so I've been doing a lot of work around systemic work. And obviously, when working in IBM, we realized that organizations are complex systems. We cannot pull them apart, because when we do, that creates unintended consequences. And so the work we do brings a very systemic lens. So we use a few tools to do that. One of the ones we use is called organizational constellations, and that is a systemic mapping tool. And it's also an embodied tool. So when you do that work, you can tap into the insight of your whole humanness rather than just the brain, and start to map the whole system and see where are things being excluded. Because in systems work, when we have an exclusion, then that's what causes some of the challenges in a business. And so you're able to physically bring people in to represent the system and start to gather data and find what's missing here. Where are the disconnections? Where are things facing away from each other? You might see potentially that the customer is right on the edge of the constellation, right on the edge of the room, far away from the sales team. So what's going on there? And so you get this incredibly rich data about the whole system. So that's one tool that we use. We also use the Barrett values consciousness model, because values are our essential human way. And so we have that kind of capability in the business to go in and values map and look at what are the values of people, what are the values of team, and what are the values of the organization, and where are they in alignment? Because one of the things that's really crucial is alignment. And when we don't have alignment and there are disconnects, that's when the system gets all out of balance. So we use that as a core tool. And then the last tool that we use is storytelling. Story as a cultural diagnostic and a cultural change tool, but also story as a human relational tool. Because what we know is all work gets done in relationship with other people, and we've kind of forgotten that piece. And we are all walking around with judgments and assumptions and expectations of people and our own inner critics, and that shows up in the work that we do. So we bring those kinds of tools in to help companies go, okay, we're dealing with burnout, this is how we would take you through it. Or we're dealing with change overload, how are we potentially, could we use our purpose as a simplifier for the changes that we put in place? So depending on what the organization is going through, we bring that suite of tools, which is quite an unusual set.
Thank you so much for clarifying, Fiona, and it sounds so exciting. Fiona, what do you think?
Very excited.
Yes, it's amazing. What do you think is your main motivator?
So I am really driven by every voice matters. That's my that's my kind of calling card. So within the business context, I'm always looking to provide the space for every voice to be heard and included. So that's what drives me in the kind of human spirit in the workplace. On a more personal note, I have two young men. I have a 16-year-old and an about to be 13-year-old. And my vision is a different model of leadership for them in business where they can embrace their fully human, authentic selves. You know, I spent so much of my time in an imbalance in my masculine and feminine. I was heavily in my masculine, obviously in IBM, the days of the 80s and shoulder pads and yeah, we will steel ourselves and we will do this. And that's part of the reason I had my breakthrough was because of understanding that. And so my hope is to bring a more balanced where we can bring both of the masculine and feminine. This isn't a gender thing. Everyone has those qualities within them, and we need to use them at different times in different ways. And we've stripped out a lot of that kind of intuition, nurturing, and much more emergent way. You know, the feminine is much more emergent and sensing, and the masculine is much more directional. And you need both of those, especially in these complex times. So my dream is a new form of leadership for my young boys.
And thank you for saying that. And I think I've been thinking about that, that we are really living in a transactional world, and where we want to get to is relational, because at the end of the day, that's what is going to bring about so much change. Fiona, thank you for your service. And I think, what would you say is your top quality or your top qualities? What makes you good at what you do?
So I think I'm one of the things I'm, and it comes down to every voice matters, is I'm very tuned into an environment and who is participating and who is not, and what might be going on there. So my kind of sensing piece of that is very strong. And also I think my deep rooting in the work of storytelling means I'm always looking for an opportunity to give somebody a space to share their story, and through that feel valued, heard and appreciated. And by me listening, I get the greatest gift because I get to hear their story and I get to connect with them. And I think that storytelling expertise, and I see the world through stories, comes through in every piece of work, because we can work at so many different levels with story. We can work with a leadership team and how do they make the case for change and tell the story of that change to connect with people's hearts. But we can also work in a relational moment to see where something has broken down. Can story reset us and reset our expectations? So I think, you know, and trying to be of service and bring that compassionate perspective. And, you know, I've obviously battled my own inner voices, and I understand what it's like to give yourself a hard time and set yourself too high expectations. And so I hope I can bring that compassion to others and hold the space for them.
And you do, Fiona. What are you most proud of?
Oh, well, obviously my two boys would be my first step. But I think also that I have persevered and stuck to my beliefs, and that I put myself in very difficult situations, and I'm always wanting to learn and to grow. And so I think, you know, obviously, you know, I had my business back in the 2000s. I've done the work with Motive and now with Organisational Alchemy. And I think this is the one I'm most proud of, because this is the one where I am being fully authentic, you know, where I'm actually speaking the things that matter to me and sharing my journey. Because if I share mine, then I give permission for others as well. And that's what we need right now, is that permission to say I'm not okay, to say I'm having a bit of a break here, and, you know, and to really explore those gifts. Because I think in our past, you know, we all have trauma, we've all had difficult situations, and when we can flip it and see that as the gift, you know, that's incredibly powerful. And that's the thing I think's been so transformational for me, is rather than seeing that breakdown as shame, to see, my goodness, I'm a completely different person and I'm so much happier with who I am now. And that flip is something I think everyone has within them, to not get caught in the victim story, but to look at what was it that happened, and what does that mean that I can empathize with others? Because I can empathize with people who've struggled with all sorts of things that relate to my background, and that's the gift I can bring. So I think it is that flip is pretty makes me pretty happy to be in this place.
Oh, Fiona, thank you for telling us. Fiona, what top tips would you give to a company that is struggling in any of those areas?
I would say, first, of course, go for the stories. Give people a chance to share their lived experience of being at work. And by doing that, don't feel you have to fix something, because I think we're always coming with, I've got to fix this mindset. But actually just holding the space for people to share their lived experience will give you a huge amount of data around the culture. And that data is then the source for you to transform with. So I think find the stories, listen to the stories, create a storytelling culture, because it's our way of celebrating, it's our way of connecting, it's our way of uncovering and discovering. So I think that's really important. I think the second thing is be systemic. Don't take a piecemeal approach. Don't think, right, well-being, let's get some yoga in place, let's get some breath workshops. But my experience of well-being has been around working with my autonomic nervous system. It starts here, and we've been treating it here, and we need to start here. And so I think, and that's really simple techniques that we can use, is how do we get out of a red state of dysregulation and into a green state? And if leaders can create that green zone of calm, then they're going to help their teams as well. So I think teaching about the autonomic nervous system is the next frontier in well-being, and really helping people understand heart coherence, understand how to come back out of hijacked stress and into the green zone. So I think on a kind of, a systemic piece, we need both that autonomic nervous system, but we also need to see the whole, and and work and use the power of purpose and sustainability as a transformational energy as well, because we have this moment on this planet, and our planet is so beautiful. And I hope that we can step into that without a sense of shame, but with a sense of possibility, and see that I've worked with many companies on their purpose transformation and witnessed how powerful that purpose is in transforming that business. So starting with sustainability, having a systemic mindset, bringing the stories in, and working on the human well-being at the level of the nervous system, I think would be my top takeaways.
Amazing, Fiona. And yes, because it's a shared purpose, right? That gives it so much power.
Yes, and we can align our values into that, because everyone has a role to play. I remember working with a big bank, and I was doing an emerging change program for them, and I did a purpose exercise, and one guy said, well, I'm just an accountant. And I said, but you're the one who keeps the finances flowing. Without your finances and your insight into the financial health of the business, there is no business. So of course you play a role. Everyone does. It doesn't matter what role you play, or however clerical or administrative you feel it is, there is always a piece of the purpose there, and you are always supporting your colleagues in the business to achieve its outcomes. It's just a question of helping people find that sense-making moment to explore that.
Yeah, amazing, Fiona. So, what are your goals and plans and dreams for your future?
So I'm really passionate about this topic of conscious business, and that we need a new way of businesses to be. And that's where organizational alchemy has come from, is to really sit at that point of supporting businesses in that systemic view, where they can make a contribution to our planet, and to considering the climate crisis, and to supporting people and fulfilling their potential. Because we are at this crisis point, and I feel that mental health thing so strongly, and I see a different way. So I'm really hopeful that we can really grasp this opportunity and bring in some different methodologies and embodiment work, and using the field in the constellations work to really connect in different ways. So my goals are to stay in alignment at Organisational Alchemy with our values, and really be of service in supporting conscious businesses on this transformation of creating amazing outcomes for people, planet, and society.
Oh, that's incredible, Fiona, and all the best. And thank you so much for talking to us today and for this inspiring conversation.
Definitely, you are a wonderful host, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story.